The new recruit commander Zextar clicked his mandibles in annoyance as he watched the newest addition to his elite strike team shuffle into the briefing room. The human female was smaller than most of her species, barely reaching the shoulder of the towering Krillian warriors who dominated the Galactic Defense Corps. Her equipment looked standard issue, nothing special about her armor or weapons, yet somehow, this unremarkable creature had scored higher on the combat simulations than veterans with decades of experience. Captain Sarah Chen, Zextar announced to the assembled team, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded respect across a dozen star systems. Your new squad member. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Gorth, a massive rhino-like Brutarian, snorted in disbelief. His species were known for their incredible strength and nearly impenetrable hide. The idea that a soft-skinned human could contribute anything meaningful to their operations seemed laughable to him. Commander, with respect, rumbled Kexisha, the team's Vraxian explosives expert. We are the Ghost Squadron. We handle the most dangerous missions in the galaxy. Perhaps the human would be better suited for logistics. Sarah stood quietly, her dark eyes taking in each team member. She had heard it all before during her years climbing through the ranks. Humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Defense Corps, and many still saw them as weak. Fragile creatures who had gotten lucky with their technology rather than earning their place through strength. Zextar's four eyes focused on Sarah. The human stays. High Command has reviewed her records extensively. Captain Chen has completed more solo missions than the rest of you combined. He paused, letting that sink in. Her success rate is perfect. 100%. Solo missions against pirates and smuggler, scoffed Veltar, the team's serpentine infiltration specialist. Not real combat against the Drakhari Empire. The Drakhari were the galaxy's current nightmare. A militaristic species that had been expanding aggressively for the past 50 years, consuming worlds and enslaving populations. Their technology was advanced, their tactics brutal, and their soldiers were bred specifically for warfare. No one had successfully stood against them in direct combat. Sarah finally spoke, her voice calm and steady. I've read all your files too. Impressive records, all of you. I look forward to working with such experienced warriors. Gorth laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Working with us? Little human. You'll be lucky if you can keep up. When the shooting starts, stay behind us and try not to get in the way. The shooting already started, Sarah replied quietly. 3 months ago, when the Drakhari hit the mining colony on Zerion Prime, 6,000 civilians dead. Last week they took the agricultural world of Haven's Rest, 12 million people now in slave camps. She looked at each team member in turn. We're not here to measure who's strongest. We're here to stop them. Zextar nodded approvingly. At least the human understood the stakes. Your first mission together launches in 6 hours. Intelligence reports a Drakhari forward base on the moon of Kethvar. Small garrison, maybe 200 soldiers. Should be a simple reconnaissance and sabotage operation. Simple? Kexisha's scales rippled with amusement.
Drakhari bases are fortresses.
Their soldiers are 8 feet tall, armored like battle tanks and trained from birth to kill. Nothing simple about facing them. Sarah studied the tactical display that materialized in the center of the room. The Drakhari base was indeed formidable. Multiple layers of defenses, sensor networks, automated turrets, and patrol routes that covered every approach. She memorized every detail, her mind already working through possibilities. Standard approach would be to wait for a supply convoy, suggested Veltar. Infiltrate during the chaos of landing operations. Too risky, Gorth disagreed. Direct assault at dawn. Hit them before they're fully awake. Both plans have merit, Zextar said diplomatically. Captain Chen, thoughts? Sarah continued studying the display. What's the primary objective? Intelligence gathering or destruction of the facility? Both, if possible. But intelligence is priority 1. We need to know their expansion plans. Then we go quiet. Night insertion, avoid contact entirely. Get in, download their data cores, plant charges on key systems, get out. They never know we were there until everything explodes. Impossible, Kexisha declared. Look at those sensor grids. A dust mote couldn't get through undetected. You're thinking like a big target, Sarah replied. All those sensors are calibrated for threats your size. Humans are smaller, move differently. We can slip through gaps that would trigger alerts for larger species. And when you're discovered? Gorth asked mockingly. When a Drakhari warrior spots you? What then, little human? Sarah's expression didn't change. Then I deal with it. The meeting broke up with the mission parameters set. Standard infiltration, with Sarah taking point on reconnaissance while the others provided backup and extraction support. As the team dispersed to prepare their equipment, Zextar noticed the subtle way they positioned themselves. Despite their words, they were already unconsciously protecting the human, treating her like a liability to be managed rather than a resource to be utilized. In the equipment bay, Sarah methodically checked her gear. Her rifle was a human design, smaller and more precise than the heavy weapons favored by other species. Her armor was lightweight composite, offering mobility over protection. Everything about her loadout screamed fragility to anyone watching. Beltar slithered over, his scales shifting colors in what passed for concern among his people. Human, I have fought the Drakhari before. They are not like the criminals you are used to hunting. They feel no fear, show no mercy. If you hesitate for even a moment, I appreciate the concern, Sarah replied, adjusting her rifle's scope. But you don't need to worry about me hesitating. How can you be so calm? He asked. Do you not understand what we face? Sarah looked up at him, and for a moment Veltar saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. It wasn't fear or bravado. It was the calm certainty of someone who had looked death in the face so many times that it had become an old acquaintance. I understand perfectly, she said quietly. The question is whether they understand what they're facing. As the team prepared for departure, none of them could have predicted that in 18 hours, everything they thought they knew about humans would change forever. The galaxy was about to learn why the species that had crawled out of a death world called Earth had never met a fight they couldn't win. For into enemy territory, the stealth ship, Silent Predator, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kethvar system, its advanced dampening fields making it nearly invisible to most sensors. Through the viewport, the team could see their destination, a barren moon orbiting a gas giant, its surface scarred by mining operations and the geometric patterns of military construction. Sarah floated in zero gravity near the observation deck, studying the Drakhari base through high-powered telescopes. The enemy had chosen their location well. The facility was built into a crater wall, using the natural rock formation as both camouflage and protection. Only the sensor arrays and communication towers were visible from orbit. Insertion Point Alpha is compromised, announced Lieutenant Hexra, the ship's crystalline navigation officer. His translucent body pulsed with geometric patterns of light as he processed sensor data. New patrol routes detected. They've added roving guards. Zextar studied the updated tactical display. Insertion Point Beta? Also covered. The Drakhari have been busy since our last intelligence update. Gorth cracked his knuckles, each pop echoing through the ship like small explosions. Told you we should go with the direct assault. Kick down their front door and settle this the old-fashioned way. And alert every Drakhari ship within 10 light years, Veltar hissed. Brilliant strategy. Sarah continued her observation, seemingly oblivious to the debate raging behind her. She had noticed something the others missed. The patrol routes weren't random. They followed a pattern based on the natural shadows cast by the crater walls and the orbital mechanics of the gas giant above. There was a window, brief but exploitable. There, she said quietly, marking a point on the tactical display. Insertion Point Gamma, the north face of the crater. Kexishaw's scales darkened with skepticism. That's a sheer cliff face, human. 100-meter drop to the base perimeter. Even our grav lifts couldn't manage that approach safely. I don't need a grav lift, Sarah replied. Free climbing. One-person insertion. Absolutely not, Zextar said immediately. This is a team mission. We go together or not at all. Commander, look at the sensor coverage, Sarah argued, highlighting the defensive grid. Any group larger than one person will trigger multiple detection systems. But a single infiltrator moving during the shadow window. She ran a simulation on the tactical computer. 67% chance of reaching the facility undetected. And what happens when you're inside alone? Gorth demanded. Drakhari warriors aren't exactly known for their hospitality. Sarah's expression remained calm. I complete the mission. Download the intelligence, plant the charges, exfiltrate to the rendezvous point. This is madness, Veltar protested. I am the infiltration specialist. If anyone should attempt this suicide mission, it should be me. You're 7 feet long and glow in certain light spectrums, Sarah pointed out. I'm 5'6" and trained in stealth operations on worlds where everything wants to kill you. Zextar was torn. Command had made it clear that Chen was not to be underestimated, but sending her in alone violated every principle of team operations he had learned in his 40 years of military service. Yet the tactical situation was undeniable. A team insertion would almost certainly result in discovery and a running firefight they couldn't win. "What's your exfiltration plan?" he asked finally. Sarah manipulated the holographic display, showing a route that wound through the base's industrial sections. "The mining equipment creates electromagnetic interference that masks movement signatures. I use the automated cargo lifts to reach the surface, then rappel down the cliff face to the rendezvous point. And if you're discovered, then you'll know because the explosions will be visible from orbit." Hexra's light pattern shifted to what passed for alarm among his people. "Captain, the Drakari response to intruders is always maximum force. They don't take prisoners." "Neither do I," Sarah replied simply. The weight of her words settled over the team like a cold blanket. There was something in the way she said it, a matter-of-fact certainty that made even Gorth's combative nature seem hesitant by comparison. Zextar made his decision. "We have 6 hours until the optimal shadow window. Chen, you have that long to prep. Everyone else be ready for immediate extraction once she reaches the rendezvous point." He fixed her with his most serious stare. "Captain, this mission is intelligence gathering, not a one-person war. Get in, get the data, get out. No heroics." "Understood, Commander." As the team dispersed to make final preparations, Sarah retreated to the equipment bay to modify her gear. She stripped her loadout down to absolute essentials. No heavy weapons, no backup systems. Nothing that would slow her down or create unnecessary noise. Her rifle was replaced with a compact sidearm. Her armor was swapped for a form-fitting stealth suit that would bend light around her form. Veltar found her there, carefully applying camouflage patterns to her exposed skin. "Human," he said quietly. "I fought beside your species during the Zephyrian conflict. I watched human soldiers die to save my squad. I do not doubt your courage, but courage alone will not be enough against the Drakari." Sarah looked up from her preparations. "What did you see when those humans died?" They did not break. Even when surrounded, even when facing certain death, they kept fighting. It was unlike anything I had witnessed from other species. "We have a saying on Earth," Sarah replied, returning to her preparations. "It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog." I do not understand this reference to dogs. Predators, pack hunters, evolved to bring down prey much larger than themselves through persistence and intelligence. She finished the camouflage and began checking her weapons one final time. "The Drakari think they know what humans are capable of because they've only fought our regular military. They've never faced someone who grew up hunting things that could tear apart a tank with their bare claws." Veltar's scales rippled with curiosity. "Your world truly breeds such creatures?" "My world breeds everything," Sarah said, securing her gear. "And humans learn to survive at the top of the food chain not through size or strength, but through being more stubborn, more adaptable, and more willing to do whatever it takes than anything else on the planet." The ship's warning klaxon sounded, indicating they had reached the insertion point. Sarah made her way to the launch bay, where a small insertion pod waited. The rest of the team gathered to see her off, their expressions ranging from concern to outright skepticism. "Remember," Zextar said as she climbed into the pod, "you're not trying to prove anything. Just complete the mission and come home." Sarah sealed her helmet and gave him a thumbs up, a distinctly human gesture that had become recognizable throughout the galaxy. "See you in a few hours, Commander." As the pod launched silently toward the moon below, Gorth turned to the others. "Anyone else think we just sent that human to her death?" "Perhaps," Veltar replied thoughtfully, "but I suspect the Drakari are about to learn something they will not enjoy." The pod carrying Sarah Chen disappeared into the shadow of Kethvar's surface, beginning what would become the most documented and studied military operation in galactic history. First contact Sarah's insertion pod landed with barely a whisper in the shadows of Kethvar's crater wall. The moon's low gravity made the 100-meter cliff face less daunting than it would have been on Earth, but the sheer rock offered few handholds. She began her descent using equipment that would have seemed primitive to her alien teammates: simple pitons, rope, and the kind of rock-climbing techniques humans had perfected on their homeworld's mountains. What her teammates didn't understand was that every human child learned to climb before they could properly walk. Earth's gravity wells from the shallow slopes of Luna to the crushing depths of high-G training worlds had made humans the galaxy's most adaptable species when it came to moving through three-dimensional space. The Drakkari base spread out below her like a metallic cancer on the moon's surface. Sensor arrays swept back and forth in predictable patterns, exactly as the intelligence briefings had indicated. The enemy relied too heavily on technology, Sarah noted. They had forgotten that sometimes the best sensor network was a pair of experienced eyes and the instincts that came from a lifetime of hunting. She reached the base perimeter just as the shadow window opened. The gas giant above eclipsed the system's sun, plunging the crater into darkness. Sarah's stealth suit adjusted automatically, bending the available light around her form until she was little more than a shimmer in the air. The outer fence was designed to stop vehicles and large assault forces. For someone of Sarah's size and training, it was merely an inconvenience. She slipped through a maintenance gap near a drainage outlet, the kind of oversight that happened when engineers designed defenses against enemies who were all 7 feet tall or larger. Inside the perimeter, Sarah moved like smoke through the industrial sections of the base. The Drakkari had built their facility using standard Imperial architecture. Massive corridors designed for their oversized warriors, heavy doors that could withstand direct artillery strikes, and surveillance systems calibrated for threats that moved with the subtlety of freight trains. None of it was designed to detect something human-sized moving with the fluid grace of Earth's apex predator. Sarah had made it halfway to the command center when she encountered her first Drakkari warrior. The creature was exactly what the briefings had described. 8 feet of muscle and bone wrapped in powered armor that could deflect plasma rifle shots. Its helmet housed sensors that could detect heat signatures from a kilometer away, and its weapon could punch through tank armor. By every measure of galactic military doctrine, this single warrior was worth a dozen soldiers of most species. It was also completely unaware that death was crouched in the shadows, 3 meters away. Sarah studied the Drakkari's patrol pattern for several minutes. Like all members of his species, the warrior moved with mechanical precision, following routes that had been drilled into him since childhood. No improvisation, no random checks, no deviation from protocol. It was exactly the kind of predictable behavior that human special forces had been trained to exploit. She could have avoided him entirely. The corridor he was guarding had alternate routes, ventilation shafts and maintenance tunnels that would have allowed her to reach her objective without confrontation. That would have been the safe choice, the smart choice. But Sarah had noticed something that changed everything. The warrior wore command insignia. Not just any warrior, but a squad leader with access to higher-level security systems. His biometric data would open doors that might otherwise require dangerous hacking attempts. More importantly, his communication gear would let her monitor Drakkari tactical frequencies during her infiltration. The smart play wasn't avoidance. The smart play was acquisition. Sarah moved with the patience of a predator that had evolved to hunt prey much larger and more dangerous than herself. She circled through the maintenance areas, using her superior knowledge of three-dimensional movement to position herself above the warrior's patrol route. When he passed beneath a junction of support beams, she was ready. The attack was over before the Drakkari realized it had begun. Sarah dropped from above, her momentum and the moon's low gravity, combining to drive her boots into the gap between the warrior's helmet and chest armor. The impact would have been lethal to most species, but Drakkari physiology was notoriously robust. Instead of dying, the warrior staggered, his massive hands reaching up to grab his attacker. This was the moment that would change everything. The Drakkari warrior's hands closed around what he expected to be a solid target. Instead, Sarah flowed like water through his grasp, her smaller size and human flexibility allowing her to twist in ways that defied his understanding of anatomy. Before he could process what was happening, she had wrapped herself around his neck like a living garrote. Most species would have tried to overpower the Drakkari's superior strength. Humans had learned long ago that trying to win a contest of strength against a superior opponent was a fool's game. Instead, Sarah used precision. Her vibro knife found the weak point where his armor's power coupling met his helmet's life support system. One precise cut, guided by the kind of anatomical knowledge that came from growing up on a world where everything was trying to kill you, and the warrior's systems began shutting down. But Drakhari warriors didn't die easily. Even with his armor compromised, the warrior spun and slammed Sarah against the corridor wall with bone-crushing force. On any other species, the impact would have been fatal. But humans had evolved on a high-gravity world where falling down wrong could kill you. Sarah's bones were denser than most aliens could imagine. Her muscles adapted to function under crushing pressure. She absorbed the impact and struck back immediately. The warrior's helmet was filled with sensors and communication equipment. It was also the most vulnerable part of his anatomy. Sarah's second knife strike wasn't aimed at his armor or his weapons. It was aimed at the soft tissue behind his jaw, where human anatomy lessons had taught her that even Drakhari had pressure points. The warrior dropped like a felled tree. Sarah stood over her defeated opponent, breathing hard but uninjured. Around her, the base continued its normal operations, completely unaware that one of their elite warriors had just been neutralized by something they would have considered barely worth. Noticing, she quickly stripped the warrior of his communication gear and biometric identifiers, then dragged his unconscious form into a maintenance closet. He would wake up eventually, but not for several hours. By then, the mission would be long over. As she continued toward the command center, now with access to Drakhari tactical frequencies, Sarah listened to the casual chatter of enemy forces going about their routine duties. They spoke of the coming expansion, of worlds to be conquered and populations to be enslaved. They spoke with the confidence of a species that had never met serious resistance. That was about to change. What Sarah didn't know was that her insertion pod had carried more than just transportation. Hidden in its hull was a quantum recording device, designed to monitor and transmit everything that happened during the mission. Every move she made, every technique she used, every moment of her encounter with the Drakhari warrior was being recorded in perfect detail. Soon, that recording would reach the highest levels of galactic command, and when it did, no one would ever underestimate a human again. Deep infiltration, using the fallen warrior's biometric data, Sarah accessed sections of the base that would have been impossible to reach through conventional infiltration. The Drakhari security systems, designed to keep out armies, barely registered her presence as she moved through corridors meant for creatures twice her size. The command center lay at the heart of the facility, buried beneath layers of armor and defensive systems. As Sarah descended through the base's levels, she began to understand the true scope of the Drakhari operation. This wasn't just a forward observation post. It was a staging area for something much larger. The walls were covered with holographic displays showing star charts that made her blood run cold. Red markers indicated targets throughout the galaxy's outer rim territories. Blue markers showed Drakhari fleet positions. The pattern was unmistakable. They were preparing for a massive coordinated assault that would bring a dozen systems under their control simultaneously. Sarah activated her recording equipment, capturing every detail of the invasion plans. This intelligence alone would justify the risk of the mission, but she wasn't finished yet. The central computer core contained detailed fleet compositions, timetables, and most importantly, the location of the Drakhari High Command. As she worked to access the computer systems, Sarah monitored the communication channels through the stolen equipment. The chatter was routine, but she noticed something troubling. The warriors spoke with absolute confidence about their upcoming campaigns. They discussed the conquest of inhabited worlds like humans might discuss weekend plans. One conversation caught her attention. Two warriors were discussing the recent capture of a human merchant vessel. "The prisoners are being held in Section 7, one voice said. "Command wants to study them before the interrogation begins. I hear their bones break easily," the other replied with what passed for amusement among Drakhari. "Should make for interesting experiments." Sarah's hand stilled on the computer interface. The mission parameters were clear: intelligence gathering and sabotage. Rescuing prisoners wasn't part of the objective, and attempting it would compromise everything she had accomplished so far. But those were her people in Section 7. For a moment, Sarah closed her eyes and thought about her training. Human military doctrine emphasized mission completion above all else. Personal feelings, individual lives, even entire units were expendable if the larger objective required it. It was a cold calculus that had allowed humanity to survive and prosper in a galaxy that seemed designed to kill them. Then, she thought about why humans fought in the first place. The computer finished downloading the intelligence data. Sarah planted her first set of charges on the main server cores, setting them for delayed detonation. Then she made a decision that would have horrified her commanders but was perfectly natural for someone raised on Earth. She was going to save those prisoners, and she was going to make the Drakhari pay for taking them. Section 7 was heavily guarded, but Sarah now had advantages her original mission plan hadn't anticipated. The stolen communication gear allowed her to monitor guard rotations in real time. The biometric access meant she could move through secured areas without triggering alerts. Most importantly, her encounter with the first warrior had taught her something crucial about Drakhari psychology. They were used to fighting enemies who met them head-on. The concept of a threat that struck from shadows, that used their own size against them, was completely foreign to their military thinking. The guard rotation changed just as Sarah reached Section 7. 3 warriors replaced 2, indicating that something important was housed in this area. Sarah waited in the ventilation system above, watching their patrol patterns and listening to their conversations. "The humans are pathetic," one guard rumbled. "They cried when we killed their captain." "At least they didn't resist," another replied. "Remember the Zenthari prisoners? Took 3 squads to subdue them. These humans just surrendered. Weak species. Easy conquest." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm. Anger was a luxury she couldn't afford. Instead, she planned. The ventilation grate was directly above the guard station. The corridor beyond led to the holding cells. 3 warriors, each armed with weapons that could level a building. By conventional thinking, this was an impossible situation. Sarah wasn't thinking conventionally. Humans had learned to fight dirty long before they reached the stars. Growing up on a world where everything from the weather to the wildlife was actively trying to kill you, tended to develop creative problem-solving skills. Sarah had been trained by the best Earth had to offer, then refined that training in conflicts throughout the galaxy. She dropped a small device through the grate. It landed silently behind the guard station, completely unnoticed by the warriors. The device began emitting a subsonic frequency that interfered with Drakhari audio processing. Not enough to cause alarm, just enough to make them slightly less alert. Then Sarah began her attack. She didn't drop into the corridor like before. Instead, she used the base's own infrastructure against its defenders. The power conduits that fed the guard station ran through the walls, protected by armor plating that would stop most weapons. But Sarah had brought something special from Earth. Thermite charges designed for cutting through ship hulls. The first explosion took out the lighting. The second severed the power feeds. In the sudden darkness, 3 Drakhari warriors found themselves blind and confused, their helmet sensors overwhelmed by the electromagnetic interference from the damaged system. Sarah dropped into their midst like an avenging angel. The first warrior went down to a perfectly placed strike that severed his armor's power coupling. The second turned toward the sound of his falling comrade, only to find himself grappling with something that moved like liquid shadow in the darkness. The third warrior managed to raise his weapon before Sarah's vibro knife found the weak point in his neck armor. The entire engagement lasted less than 30 seconds. Sarah secured the area and moved to the holding cells. What she found there made her decision to deviate from mission parameters seem like the most natural thing in the world. 12 humans, captured from a civilian transport that had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were injured but alive, their faces showing the kind of grim determination that had carried their species from a single world to the stars. When they saw Sarah, their expressions shifted from despair to hope. "Who are you?" whispered the apparent leader, a middle-aged woman with the calloused hands of a freight engineer. "Captain Sarah Chen, Galactic Defense Corps," Sarah replied, cutting through their restraints. "I'm getting you out of here, but the guards are no longer a problem. Can everyone move?" The freed prisoners nodded, helping their injured comrades to their feet. Sarah distributed the weapons she had taken from the guards, quickly explaining their basic operation. None of the civilians were soldiers, but humans had an instinctive understanding of weapons that served them well. "There's a way out through the industrial sections," Sarah explained, marking their route on a portable display. "Stay together, stay quiet, and do exactly what I tell you." As they prepared to move, one of the younger prisoners looked at the fallen Drakhari warriors. "You did this alone? All 3 of them?" Sarah checked her charges, confirming the timer sequences. "They're big," she said simply. but big just makes for easier targets when you know where to aim. The escape through the base was a masterpiece of human adaptability. Sarah led the group through routes designed for maintenance crews, using her knowledge of the base's layout to avoid the remaining patrols. When they encountered obstacles, the freed prisoners showed the kind of improvisation that made their species so effective at survival. They reached the extraction point just as Sarah's charges began detonating throughout the base. The explosions weren't random, destruction but carefully planned chaos that would cripple the Drakhari operation while making her infiltration look like a full-scale assault by a much larger Orcs. As they waited for pickup, one of the prisoners asked the question that was on everyone's mind. How are we going to explain this to command? A solo infiltration that turned into a rescue mission? Sarah smiled grimly as she watched the Drakhari base burn. We're not going to explain anything. The recording equipment will speak for itself. What she didn't know was that the quantum recording device had captured everything in perfect detail. Every moment of her infiltration, every technique she had used, every decision that had turned a simple intelligence-gathering mission into something unprecedented. Soon, that recording would reach the highest levels of galactic command, and when it did, the galaxy would learn what humans were truly capable of when pushed to their limits. The recording Admiral Thexara had seen combat footage from every major battle in the last 2 centuries. As Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense Corps operations, she had reviewed thousands of hours of tactical recordings, studying everything from massive fleet engagements to small unit operations. Nothing had prepared her for what she was watching now. The quantum recording from Sarah Chen's mission had reached high command just 6 hours after the team's extraction from Kethvar. What should have been a routine after-action report had instead triggered emergency sessions at the highest levels of military leadership. Representatives from every major species in the Galactic Defense Corps had been called to witness something unprecedented. Play it again, Admiral Thexara commanded, her crystalline form shifting colors in what her species displayed when deeply troubled. The holographic display activated, showing the mission from the beginning. The recording device had captured everything in perfect 3-dimensional detail, from Sarah's cliff descent to her final extraction with 13 rescued prisoners. But it was the middle sections that had the assembled military leaders watching in stunned silence. General Voxhan, a massive Brutarian who commanded the Corps' heavy assault divisions, shook his head in disbelief. This cannot be accurate. The human defeated 3 Drakhari warriors in close combat? Impossible. The quantum recordings don't lie, replied Director Kestel, the Corps' chief intelligence officer. Her insectoid features were arranged in what passed for amazement among her species. Every detail has been verified through multiple analysis protocols. They watched as Sarah moved through the Drakhari base like a ghost, exploiting weaknesses in their defenses that no one had even known existed. The alien commanders had spent decades studying Drakhari military doctrine, looking for ways to counter their seemingly invincible warriors. Sarah had simply treated them like any other predator to be hunted. Look at this section. Admiral Thexara highlighted a particular sequence. She doesn't try to overpower them. She doesn't rely on superior technology. She uses their own size and assumptions against them. The recording showed Sarah's encounter with the first warrior in perfect detail. The assembled officers watched as she flowed around his attacks like water, striking with surgical precision at weak points that most species couldn't even reach. Every movement was calculated, every technique adapted to exploit the size difference that others saw as a disadvantage. Her species is smaller than almost every military threat in the galaxy, observed Colonel Zithmar, a towering ethereal whose people were renowned for their tactical analysis. But she turns that into an advantage. How? Earth? Director Kessitel replied, calling up files on human homeworld conditions. Look at these environmental reports. Their planet is a Class 5 death world. Extreme weather, predatory wildlife, geological instability. Their entire evolution was shaped by being prey animals that learned to hunt. The recording continued, showing Sarah's infiltration of the command center and her discovery of the invasion plans. The intelligence she had gathered was staggering in scope. Detailed fleet movements, target lists, timetables for coordinated attacks that would have caught the galaxy completely unprepared. But it was what happened next that truly shook the assembled commanders. She deviated from mission parameters, General Voxhan observed as they watched Sarah change course toward the prison section. Command doctrine clearly states that mission objectives take priority over rescue operations. Human doctrine apparently disagrees. Admiral Thexara replied quietly. They watched as Sarah single-handedly neutralized the prison guards, using tactics that were both brutally effective and utterly foreign to conventional military thinking. She didn't announce herself or demand surrender. She didn't give warnings or try to minimize collateral damage. She simply eliminated threats with the methodical efficiency of a natural predator. 3 more warriors, Colonel Zithmar noted. That makes 6 Drakhari eliminated by a single human operative. The statistical probability of this outcome is irrelevant, Director Kestel interrupted. Because it happened. The question is what we do with this information. The final sections of the recording showed Sarah leading the rescued prisoners through the base as her planted charges systematically destroyed critical systems. The explosions weren't random acts of sabotage but precisely calculated strikes that would cripple Drakhari operations, while making the infiltration appear to be a much larger assault. When the recording ended, the command chamber fell silent. For several minutes, none of the assembled officers spoke. Finally, Admiral Thexara activated the communication system. "Get me Captain Chen," she ordered. Immediately. Sarah appeared on the holographic communicator within minutes, still wearing her mission gear. Behind her, the rest of Ghost Squadron stood at attention, clearly confused about why they had been summoned to speak with the highest levels of command. "Captain Chen," Admiral Thexara began, "we have reviewed the complete recording of your mission. Your actions were unexpected. Ma'am, if there are concerns about my deviation from mission parameters, there are no concerns about your performance," the Admiral interrupted. "Rather, there are questions about how we have been utilizing your species' capabilities." Sarah's teammates exchanged glances. Commander Zextar looked particularly puzzled, his mandibles clicking nervously as he tried to understand what was happening. "Ma'am," Sarah replied carefully. General Voxhan leaned forward. "Captain, in your assessment, how many more humans possess your level of combat capability?" "Sir, I'm not considered exceptional among human special forces. Most of my training was standard Earth military doctrine adapted for galactic operations." "Standard?" Colonel Zithmar's ethereal form shimmered with disbelief. "You eliminated 6 Drakhari warriors in individual combat and completed a mission that our tactical computers estimated had a 12% probability of success." Sarah glanced at her teammates, noting their shocked expressions. "Sir, the mission parameters played to human strengths. Stealth, adaptation, individual initiative. We're not good at the kind of large-scale warfare that most species prefer, but we excel at improvisation." "How many humans serve in active military roles throughout the galaxy?" Admiral Thexara asked. "Approximately 2 million, ma'am. Most in support roles or serving integrated with alien units." Director Kestel's compound eyes focused intently on Sarah. "And how many are trained in what you call standard Earth military doctrine?" "All of them, ma'am. It's basic training for any human entering military service." The silence that followed was even more profound than before. Sarah could see the implications dawning on the faces of the alien commanders. If what she considered standard human capability could accomplish what they had just witnessed, then the galaxy had been dramatically underutilizing Earth's military potential. Admiral Thexara made a decision that would reshape galactic military doctrine forever. "Captain Chen, you are hereby promoted to Major and assigned to the Strategic Planning Division. Your first assignment is to develop training protocols that will allow other species to learn human tactical methods. Ma'am, with respect, I'm not sure our methods can be taught to species that didn't evolve. Then we'll find other ways to implement them," the Admiral interrupted. "Major, your mission recording is being distributed to every command level in the Defense Corps. By tomorrow, every military leader in the galaxy will have seen what one human accomplished against impossible odds." As the communication ended, Sarah turned to find her teammates staring at her with expressions ranging from awe to disbelief. Gorth was the first to speak. You killed 6 Drakhari warriors. By yourself?" "7, actually," Sarah corrected quietly. "I forgot about the one in the escape tunnel." Commander Zextar's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed this information. "Sarah, why didn't you tell us what your species was capable of?" "You never asked," she replied simply. "You saw us as small and weak, so we let you think that." Sometimes it's useful when enemies underestimate you. As the team dispersed, none of them could have predicted the changes that were about to sweep through the galaxy. The recording of Sarah's mission would become required viewing at every military academy. Human tactical doctrine would be studied and adapted by species throughout the Defense Corps. And most importantly, when the Drukhari Empire launched their planned invasion, they would find themselves facing an enemy that understood exactly what humans were capable of. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth had never been conquered, and why underestimating humanity was a mistake no one made twice. No one doubted her. Again, 6 months after the Kethvar mission, Major Sarah Chen stood before the largest gathering of military commanders in galactic history. Representatives from every species in the Defense Corps filled the massive amphitheater on Nexus Prime, their varied forms creating a sea of scales, chitin, crystalline structures, and energy fields. At the center of it all, a holographic display showed tactical readouts from the ongoing war against the Drukhari Empire, the war that everyone had thought would be a catastrophic defeat for the galaxy's free species, had instead become something unprecedented. A series of stunning victories built on tactics that no one had imagined possible just months before. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, Admiral Thexera announced, her crystalline form pulsing with satisfaction, I present the architect of our new tactical doctrine, Major Sarah Chen. The applause was thunderous, a cacophony of sounds from dozens of different species expressing approval in their own ways. Sarah stepped to the podium, looking out at faces that no longer showed skepticism or condescension. Now she saw respect, curiosity, and something that had been notably absent before: genuine interest in what humans could contribute to galactic defense. When I first joined Ghost Squadron, Sarah began, my teammates saw me as a liability, something to be protected rather than utilized. This wasn't their fault. They were thinking like everyone else in the galaxy: bigger is stronger, stronger is better. She activated the holographic display, showing battle footage from recent engagements against Drukhari forces. Earth taught us something different. On our world, the biggest predators aren't always the most successful. Sometimes the most successful predators are the ones that think differently. The display showed a recent battle on Corvani 7th, where a mixed unit of humans and Brutarians had encountered a Drukhari garrison. Instead of the expected frontal assault, the human advisors had suggested a completely different approach. Watch the Brutarian advance, Sarah narrated as the footage played. They're moving in small groups using cover, striking at weak points instead of trying to overwhelm the enemy with superior force. They learned to fight like predators instead of like prey. General Voxhan, the massive Brutarian commander, stood up in the audience. Major Chen's method seemed impossible at first. My people have always believed that strength should meet strength directly, but when we learned to think like humans— He gestured at the display showing his troops systematically dismantling a Drukhari position with minimal casualties. We discovered that intelligence applied properly is more powerful than raw force. The next segment showed a space battle near the Helix Nebula, where ethereal commanders had adapted human pack-hunting tactics to fleet operations. Instead of the traditional line of battle approach, the Defense Corps ships moved like wolves, coordinating their attacks to isolate and destroy Drukhari vessels one at a time. The results speak for themselves, Sarah continued. In 6 months of operations using adapted human tactics, we have achieved a casualty ratio of 15-1 against Drukhari forces. More importantly, we have liberated 47 systems and rescued over 2 billion beings from slavery. Director Kessistel activated her section of the display. Intelligence operations have been similarly transformed. Before Major Chen's mission to Kethvar, our infiltration success rate against hardened targets was approximately 8%. Using human-developed techniques, that rate has increased to 63%. A Vraxian admiral raised a scaled appendage. Major, what was the key insight that allowed other species to adapt human tactics? Our physiology is so different from yours. Sarah smiled, remembering her first day with Ghost Squadron. The key was realizing that human tactics aren't about being human. They're about thinking like a predator instead of thinking like prey. Every species in this room evolved from hunters at some point in their development. We just had to help you remember what that means. She changed the display to show training footage from various worlds. Serpentine Veltari learning to use their flexibility for infiltration missions that had previously been impossible. crystalline Thexari discovering that their energy manipulation abilities could be used for precision strikes rather than just defensive barriers. Even the massive Gorth's people learning to use their incredible strength more efficiently through careful targeting rather than brute force application. But the most important change wasn't tactical, Sarah continued. It was psychological. For too long, the galaxy has thought defensively. We built fortifications, formed defensive lines, tried to minimize losses. Humans taught the galaxy to think offensively, to take the initiative, to make the enemy react to us instead of the other way around. Commander Zextar, now promoted to general and serving as the Defense Corps' chief tactical officer, stood to address the assembly. 6 months ago, I considered humans to be a minor species that had gotten lucky with their technology. Today, I can say without hesitation that human tactical doctrine has revolutionized warfare throughout the galaxy. Not because they're physically superior, but because they think about conflict in ways the rest of us had never considered. The final segment of the presentation showed the most recent intelligence reports from Drakkari space. For the first time in 50 years, the Empire was retreating on multiple fronts. Worlds that had been under Drakkari control for decades were rising in rebellion, supported by Defense Corps forces using human-developed insurgency tactics. The war isn't over, Sarah acknowledged. The Drakkari Empire is still a formidable enemy, but they're no longer fighting the same galaxy they invaded. They're fighting an enemy that learned to think like them, then learned to think beyond them. As the presentation concluded, Admiral Thexara returned to the podium. Major Chen's mission to Kethvar was recorded as a routine intelligence-gathering operation. Instead, it became the catalyst for the most significant military transformation in galactic history. The quantum recording of her actions has been studied by every military academy in known space. Her methods have been adapted and implemented across thousands of worlds. The Admiral paused, her crystalline form shifting to colors that indicated deep respect among her people. But perhaps most importantly, Major Chen taught us that strength comes in many forms, that a species' value isn't measured by the size of their warriors or the power of their weapons, but by the depth of their thinking and the courage of their convictions. Sarah looked out at the assembled commanders, noting faces that had once looked at her with skepticism and dismissal. Gorth, whose Brutarian squad had become one of the most effective special operations units in the Corps. Feltar, who now led a multi-species infiltration school based on human stealth techniques. Kexisha, whose explosive expertise combined with human tactical thinking had revolutionized siege warfare. When I first joined Ghost Squadron, Sarah said in closing, I was told to stay behind the others and try not to get in the way. Today, I want every species in this room to know, there is no such thing as staying behind when you're fighting for the freedom of the galaxy. There is no such thing as being too small to make a difference. And there is no such thing as an enemy too powerful to defeat, as long as you're willing to think differently about how to fight them. The standing ovation lasted for 10 minutes, with species after species rising to show their respect for the human who had changed everything. As the assembly dispersed, preparing to return to their commands throughout the galaxy, they carried with them a new understanding of what humanity represented. Sarah remained behind, watching the last of the commanders file out of the amphitheater. Admiral Thexara approached, her crystalline form glowing softly. Regrets, Major? No, ma'am. Just thinking about how different things would have been if the galaxy had taken the time to understand what humans could contribute from the beginning. Perhaps, the Admiral replied, but sometimes the best lessons are the ones that come from necessity rather than planning. The galaxy needed to see what your species was capable of when pushed to the limit. Sarah nodded, then asked the question that had been on her mind for months. What happens now? When the war is over, will the galaxy remember these lessons? Admiral Thexara's form shifted to colors that indicated certainty among her people. Major, your species has fundamentally changed how this galaxy thinks about warfare, cooperation, and the value of diverse perspectives. Those changes aren't temporary expedients for wartime. They're permanent shifts in how we understand ourselves and each other. As Sarah left the amphitheater, she passed a memorial wall that had been installed to honor the heroes of the Drakkari War. Her own name was there, along with thousands of others who had fought and died to defend galactic freedom. But what struck her most wasn't the recognition of her own actions. It was seeing the names of humans who had died before the galaxy understood what they were capable of. Warriors who had been underutilized, relegated to support roles, or dismissed as insignificant because they didn't fit traditional models of military power. The galaxy would never make that mistake again. From Kethvar to the present day, Sarah's quantum recording had been viewed by over 1 billion beings throughout known space. Military academies made it required study material, tactical planning sessions,